seeing exoskeletons, automation, and even robots to help us out on the construction site. That got us thinking, where does tool technology go from here? Let's talk about it. I'm Kenny Kaler, Managing Editor of Pro Tool Reviews. I'm here with two guys that are absolutely obsessed with holograms. Clint DeBoer, Editor-in-Chief of Pro Tool Reviews. Tom Gage, we picked him up off the street somewhere.
It was a hologram.
He was a hologram. He's the embodiment of a hologram. All right, so Tom, since you're AI, we got a lot of stuff going on. Some really cool technology. We were actually just talking about the 2021 Pro Tool Innovation Awards, and let's just kind of kick this conversation off with, when you think advanced tools currently that are in use today, what comes to mind?
Well, the exoskeleton is definitely one that we've been seeing. There's been talk about them and design of them, and it's been for several years now, so it's not a new thing, but that is one that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, we've seen prototypes for a couple of years, but now we're really seeing them available for consumer use. Well, I should professional use, not consumer use, but for consumers to take to the job site.
I think that's there's a lot of jobs that are out there that are very fatiguing over time and tiring, and anytime you can take a job that's difficult to do and take the fatigue away, now all of a sudden you can work a lot longer. You're not as tired at the end of the day maybe. And also you're increasing safety too. You're not stretching maybe as far, or when you're fatigued, you're tired, and that's when accidents happen.
Are we talking about present day stuff?
Present day.
Talking about
that would be what the term current would mean, yes.
Yeah, but you're saying, what are we seeing?
What are we seeing when you think of the most advanced stuff that we have right now?
So there's stuff out there, but it's not widespread. Like what?
That's okay if it's available. It's fair game.
Yeah, what captured my eye, and I just don't know what phase it's at, but they were printing houses with concrete.
Oh yeah, 3D
that was pretty cool. So
yeah.
3D printing construction is just like, to me, fascinating, especially in the rest of the world that builds in concrete. Unlike us, we don't do as much of that.
We should do more of that.
We should do more of that.
I mean, we got termites and hurricanes.
Why not? Why wouldn't we build our houses out of sticks?
And make them dome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Just stamp them at them. Like
the 80s called, they want their hurricane house back.
Yeah, that's right. I was thinking Play-Doh, like sand, like playing at the beach, you just make a house like this. But yeah, the act of building a crane structure and then just pouring concrete into a series of layers until you get a house is kind of cool. I mean, you still got to roof it and everything else, but it's pretty neat.
Efficiency, it's not about not employing people either. People need to be around it to make sure it's manned, to make sure it's doing what it's due. So it's not necessarily taking jobs away either.
No.
But it's just a more efficient way of doing something. And it's just funny though, what frustrates me, so you see that kind of technology, but then so many people in the industry, I feel like, are like, oh, that's not a good idea, or oh, why would we do it that way? And people are so resistant to change sometimes. And so many times I feel like people think change is bad.
PEX plumbing versus copper.
Case in point.
Yeah. It doesn't take much to see it.
Right. And PEX is great. It's freeze resistant. It's quick to use. It's really great system. But I remember the early days of it, it was like no one wanted to use it.
Yeah.
And it was just, again, change. Change is bad somehow.
We fear change.
Yeah.
We fear change. I like a lot of integrated technologies I'm seeing. We saw a Cat S62 phone that had, the ability to do thermal scanning images. Just something like that, when they started the Bullard units, firefighters were the only ones really using them. There's big, giant handheld things, and they can see through walls, and they're really cool. All that stuff started getting miniaturized down and handy and useful, but still standalone devices or attachments or things like that. But now to see people integrating that technology is pretty cool. You're seeing Apple integrate LiDAR into an iPhone. That wouldn't have been possible 5 years ago. What's that going to do for imaging? When that comes to fruition, are you going to be able to scan rooms? And there's already a software out there right now, I think Matterport, where you can take your phone and scan an entire room, and basically it builds a 3D image replica.
That's incredible.
Of it. It's absolutely phenomenal. So there's so many things that are just starting to hit, and when those things get mature and they start hitting second, third generation, and we start figuring out what we really can do with it, and it hits mainstream, I don't know what's going to happen. This is going to be fun.
Well, and think about it, right? If we're having this conversation 10 years ago, we're really in the place where now everybody's going lithium ion from NiCad, but this technological leap is exponential compared to just a battery chemistry change. I mean, think about the tools we hold in our hands, right? We got Bluetooth connections, we got brushless motors, and those brushless motors require electronics, and those electronics have allowed us to do things like Milwaukee's One Key, DeWalt's Tool Connect, Bosch's Connected Ready tools, where we're now having our tool in our hand connected to our phone. We've got customizable controls in there.
Mm-hmm. We're in a good place. And there's things that a lot of people, even who maybe check out our channel and read our articles, they may not be as much into the industrial stuff, but you get into the BIM, where they're like mapping out where everything in a building goes, and they're using location technology to be able to visualize where things are to be placed. Because, I mean, you need to know. I need to put that anchor exactly right there. And Hilti's big on that. There's a lot of companies that are doing that.
And some of the tools used in that are now able to record and report the number of correct connections. So you take that BIM, it goes to engineering, gets approved. You have the guys doing the installation. It spits out a report that they map up against that BIM report, and they say, "Oh, yep, piece of cake, that's done."
Yep. We talked about the Hilti exoskeleton. Too hard. J-Bot. Now it'll go do those drilling up in the roof for you. And it'll do it according to what's laid out on the plan.
Right.
So it's completely automated, and obviously some of that stuff you need supervision, but it's doing the work. I mean, it's built right in, so it's going up there and drilling holes. That stuff's like bizarre in terms of what it's allowing people to do that we couldn't have done 10 years ago. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and we're talking about, we're really in this technological age for construction anyway, where we are seeing these things come to fruition. We've as part of the media, we get to hear about some of these things before they're ever announced, and now we're seeing the application actually show up on the job site. And it's kind of a fun place to be, and we know that there's more on the roadmap. We know that these guys are always thinking 2, 3, 5 years ahead in terms of what they already are developing for use, and then they're thinking forward from there of what's possible. What's the next battery technology going to be? What's the next automation? All of that. But let's kick back to this idea of automation for a minute. Like you were just saying, Clint, there's a lot of resistance to change, and automation seems to be kind of the enemy, kind of the elephant in the room a little bit, of people saying this is what's taken away American jobs.
I think you can speak to this, but there's two elephants in the room, and the one is automation is taking away American jobs. And the other elephant in the room is we've got all these jobs available, and nobody wants to take them. And maybe they are factory jobs, or maybe they're trade jobs, whatever it is. There are some really good paying jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Really good paying jobs. I mean, if you will make good money if you will go out and learn how to be a journeyman electrician and take your time and go through it and work with a company. Same goes with plumbing.
Yep.
Same goes with probably any other industry that I can think of off the top of my head. And so it's weird to think about those two things, but it used to be people were trying to make things, they still are, they're trying to make things better. I wonder if in the last 10 years there's a shift in focus to say, how do we continue to do this work with less people willing to do the work and not driving it?
I think there's another side of that too, because I'm a little bit of a gearhead, so automotive to me is just something I've always enjoyed. And so you look at the production of a vehicle, and at one point it was a very hands-on assembly line. Now it's very much robotic, very much automated. And the thing is I feel like people, there's always a human factor. As soon as someone touches something, is it going to be torqued right? Is it welded correctly? Is it all these other factors that all of a sudden, as soon as people start being involved in it, that seems to be where we have problems. And so on the side of automation, you can control your final quality, I think, a lot better with automation. And it's not that all things can be replaced with automation. You can't have your house wired by a robot. It's not going to work at this point.
Not yet.
This still needs a human touch. And there's jobs that will always be there that need a human touch. But for the ones that can be automated, I kind of get excited about that, because I feel like that's a jump in quality, actually. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be, once it's dialed in and figured out, you actually increase your quality of your final product at the end of the day. Less chance for human error. And not the machines are perfect, but you can at least control more if you're doing the automated
Well, and
side.
again, kind of like what we're talking about with some of the tools that we have today, when that automation can give you a report, you've got something to look at and be able to say, okay, I know it made 99 out of 100 correct connections. I need to go back and find out what was that one connection that wasn't proper and fix it.
Or torque settings, you look at like assembling different types of things. Like if you are in a factory, you might have some very specific torques on bolts and nuts. And by having tools that will actually put that nut onto the correct torque on the first try, yeah, a human's doing it, but the tool's doing the work.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And that's the type of thing, well, that's increasing quality. That's increasing the quality of what you're putting together by having those types of things in place. And that's that integrating of technology into the tool that makes that possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that always perplexed me, and this is a good and bad. It just depends on your perspective on it. But it took until now, with the development of like EV cars and things like that, before you start really starting to see people talk about a unified platform for a vehicle. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe they were just too complex before. And now that there's something simplifying about an EV concept that says, oh, we can just take this top off and put this top on and this top off. And then you see little concepts of cars driving into a garage, and you put your SUV on instead of your sports car, and it backs out, and you got a different car today. Well, that's probably never going to happen on a practical scale, but there is something about that simplification. We don't see that in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. Everything's new. Every car that rolls off the lot, they have to, we got to sell people on the new model year, and everything's changed, and all this stuff is different, and they're messing with this and that, and it's almost like it's come full circle, because it used to be a lot of shared parts across vehicles with motors. Mm-hmm. You drop the same small block in all these different vehicles, and it didn't seem to be a big difference. And then now you hit this like period of complexity, and everything went crazy. Yeah. And now you're going back to EV, and they're kind of solidifying it. Power tools are kind of similar. You're matching the battery and the motor, and then this, you're constantly seeing the shells change on them and different features, and they're moving the lights. How many times have we seen Rigid move the light from the front to the bottom to this
to the side?
You're like, so it's just kind of a weird thing, but automation could potentially unify things if you could kind of. It seems like there'd be a motivation to have simplified, unified base for things, and then you improve that over time. But I don't know. It just seems like things should get simpler. Mm-hmm. They don't seem to, though. They seem to get more complex.
Well, and it's interesting, Tom, you kind of hinted at it a few minutes ago. There's almost a difference between the development and construction and installation side of everything new compared to the maintenance and repair side once it's already set. It seems like that is one area that might be the dividing place between what can automation handle on its own versus what are you always going to need a human being for.
Sure. Well, in the maintenance and troubleshooting and things like that, I think that's always a human being thing, because someone needs to be in there listening to, I hear something weird, or I visually see something that's not right, and make those repairs. Troubleshooting. So that might be a dividing line between new production versus how do we keep it moving.
And what's odd, though, is, of course, if you go to automotive again, what's the human doing? Plugs a computer into a computer, reads the screen.
Nowadays, yes.
And, it's just a bizarre.
AI still assists the diagnosis,
yes,
but the human has to go in and actually perform the work.
You got to find it and replace the part. You got to understand what's going wrong.
Right.
Is it a valve? Is it a this? Is it a that? Is it a computer component? Is it a... So, yeah.
So now, if we think about the AI component of this a little deeper and the increased complexity that you were talking about, Clint, do you think that the increased complexity and the introduction of more and more automation is hurting our folks that are interested in going to trade schools now? Because we keep talking about this huge gap, but do you feel like that is something of an obstacle that people say, well, yeah, I'd love to go into electrical, but I can't do all that computer stuff?
I mean, the way our world is right now, at least in residential construction, thinking of just that sector, I think you're pretty safe to still go into a trade.
I was going to say, not much has changed.
Not much has changed. I mean,
we talked about PEX. That was like the biggest plumbing change.
Let's be honest. I live in a 110-year-old house, and it's still built with 2x4s the way houses are nowadays.
They were just a little bigger.
Yeah. And so you look at the construction changes over the last 100 years. To me, actually, it's really funny that our construction hasn't changed more. Mm-hmm. And the biggest change would be printing a house.
Yeah, printing a house.
Printing a house. Because at the end of the day, we've been building with CMUs, concrete cinder blocks, in the same fashion for the last 100 years as well. We've been building houses out of 2x4s for the last 100 some plus years. And it's like our technology in residential construction is unchanged, relatively unchanged for the last 100
Yeah,
years.
I remember.
It's funny to me.
Yeah,
actually.
I remember hanging out with a mutual friend of ours, Will, and he was showing me a job site years ago, and he was showing me tilt-up construction for the local company. I was like, this is amazing, And then I looked it up. It's been around for years,
Yeah, it's not nothing
decades.
new. It's nothing
They're
new.
just getting really good at it.
Right. The
they're just getting
availability
really
of it and the frequency of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the technology is better too. The floors are flatter where they
Yep.
poured the concrete walls, so now you have a more exact wall when you tip it up. It's
Yep.
it's actually truly
They're starting to really embed a lot more into
yeah.
that.
So now if you
your
want a brick
channels are in
face
there.
on it,
Yep.
when you tilt it up, guess what? It's bricked.
Yep.
So that's where technology has become a bigger part of. But what has technology done? And I hope this is what it would do: is it increase final end product quality. And that's, I think, what it's doing in those instances. But they're still very hands-on, not automated. But that's changing, though. I mean, there's grading equipment now that will grade out a lot based on a mapping system, and it's all GPS that will, if you need a grade of a 3% grade on this side of the property, it's hooked to a dozer, and it's going back and forth, and it's shaving it down and getting that grade to what the map is supposed to be, and it's automated.
As much as automowers and robotic mowers are a thing, and the landscapers are desperately trying to figure out how do we use that in our industry because these guys don't show up, or we just could save money, or whatever the reasons are. Can we just drop them off and then come back and collect them and move them and all that? Maybe down the road, you still got you still got to edge. I don't think they're going to make a spinning blade
It does it by itself?
that does it by itself. That's going to be safe. Muffy. Where's my cat?
They've had sensing technology for a long time.
Saw stop as an edger. But the other thing is
wait, it is getting better. I mean,
you still got a hedge trim. You still got to you can't
your
do it
vacuum.
all.
You know your vacuum in your house.
Yeah.
So if your pet does make a mess on the floor,
I heard about that.
there's technology now.
Apocalypse.
That will detect whether there's some poo there and not spread it through the rest of the house.
You heard of this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Apocalypse? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I mean,
I had no idea until I.
That's a definite improvement on a technology. That's a.
Who would have thought in 2021 we would be able to buy automated robotic vacuum cleaners with poo detecting technology?
That's pretty good.
That's a thing. It's actually a thing. It's a thing.
And somebody somewhere in a meeting said, I need you to design this.
Some owner of a
I'm
company
sure.
had their product do that all over their house and went, you need to solve this problem. I'll be back here tomorrow. I want a solution or you're all fired.
All right, so it sounds like the majority of this really high-tech stuff that we're talking about is primarily benefiting commercial and industrial construction.
Feels like it.
Not as much filtering into the residential construction, which we can go across the fence right now and see all kinds of OSHA violations and other stuff going on.
Yep.
So let's try to forecast a little bit. This is always kind of fun, but sometimes kind of dangerous too. Let's think forward 10 years from now.
Only 10?
Only 10. What kind of advancements would you expect to see? And let's specifically talk about residential construction.
No more shingles.
No more shingles.
I think our roofing
No
technologies are horrible. Like, it blows my mind that we still nail a product on our roof that goes bad in 15 years.
In Florida, at least.
I mean, across the country though, you deal with frost and freezing issues in
that's
other
true.
places.
That's
So
true.
it's just, to me, it's like, you look at other countries and what other countries have done for their roofing materials and things like that, and how do we not get away from asphalt shingles? To me, that's the number one thing. Like, I just can't believe, and it's labor intensive, messy.
You're preaching to the choir. I just put standing seam on my
I
house
know,
and my
it-
shop, and
and
it was
it's-
very expensive, but I'll never have to touch it.
Right, and so
It's
it's
a
like,
100-year roof. I mean, it's
but if you think about it though, it
shingles are
still
ridiculous.
ends up long-term being cheaper than doing 3 roofs over the rest of your lifetime.
Well,
on this
especially if
house.
you account for inflation.
Right.
What's that second and third roof going to cost? More than the first one.
Right, and that's where I'm like, I see in residential construction a lot of inefficiencies in the way our methods are of way we construct, and also the amount of waste. Look at when you build a house. In the process of building that house, you're going to go through 2 or 3 30-yard dumpsters of trash. Really? That's a lot of material you're buying and cutting up and throwing away. And there's just some interesting things, that our residential construction methods, at least for wood construction, there's no efficiency to it. And long term, we're not building products that last lifetimes anymore either.
Right. Well, and I have never been a roofer. So there's some roofing history that I don't understand, but it's like I look at some of the Spanish style and Middle Eastern style homes, flat roofs, a little bit of grading to let any water come off the top of it, but the roof serves as your upper deck. It's like practically, wouldn't I rather have another couple 300 square feet of entertaining deck space over my house than just this pitched thing that's got some color on it?
Yeah, it's going to go bad after 15 years.
It's going to go bad after 15 years?
Something, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a style choice. It's just one of those that I look around and go, I can't use any of that space up there.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, we start talking about the money you spend on something you can't even really do anything. It just keeps you dry.
Well, another fascinating one that came out recently with technology too, it's not maybe automation, but as far as technology and thinking, is super white paint.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
That was
cool.
fascinating to me too, because I mean, having lived in Florida, having had dark vehicles versus light colored vehicles, there's definitely a difference when you go from silver and white to dark blue and black or brown. And so with this paint that they've developed that reflects more of the sun, it's an interesting concept in the idea, especially like here where we use a lot of air conditioning. Maybe it might be boring to see a whole bunch of white roofs
White
around.
roofs are so ugly, though.
But I'd be willing to have a white roof if I save on my electric bill.
Right.
And so I don't care.
You really have to just plan your house.
Yeah, so
you can make white look good.
Yeah,
but
so
you
you
can
just
Wear
figure
a
it out.
welding helmet if you go through the neighborhood if everybody's got that, but whatever.
You can't fly over the house.
But it's the technology, that idea that says
Yeah.
it sees a problem, and how do we remedy this? As we tax our electric grid, as we add more EV cars, as we do these things, we're actually demanding more of our even though we have LED lighting and things now, we're actually demanding more power
Yeah.
for our daily lives as more people adopt EV. And so, that's one area to me, it's like, that's kind of fascinating actually. That's the kind of technology that I'm like, that's a good idea. That's not a bad thing if you're able to reflect more sun.
It's amazing to me to watch, all of these builders next to us going 1,000+ homes, right? Very limited designs, right? They only have maybe 4 models, 5 models, something like that. And they're still built using a bunch of crews from the ground. It's weird to me, you know what I mean? Like
It hasn't changed.
It's bizarre to me that they're not just bringing in trucks and cranes and here's the south wall, here's the connecting part, like modular.
That's an
you know what I mean?
interesting-
Like, why are we not building more modular? And modular home doesn't mean cheap.
Right.
It just means you're automating a large portion of the process
Right.
somewhere else, so that when you bring that thing in, it's a lot closer to completion than having to frame it up. And
Arguably a lot higher quality product.
yeah,
as
you're
well.
putting more
It's
wood together when you do
well,
prefab.
that, and also it's built in a place that's climate controlled, so everything is square, straight. You're not dealing with the elements. How many days does it rain here in Florida?
Oh,
and these
a lot.
houses
They get soaked.
roofs are open on them, 2-story house, plywood on the deck, and we have to worry about buying subflooring that's waterproofed because it ranges torrentially here. The rain is really strong.
When it rains, it rains.
It rains, and so you're like looking at that like, okay, so your house is open to the elements for 6 months before you move in, and then people wonder why. I wonder why I have allergy and mold issues. Maybe you don't see it, but it's just how many things have we put into our construction process that just doesn't add to health.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3D printing for the exterior and maybe prefabbing your interior walls. You think we can be there in 10 years?
Yes.
You could, if you wanted to be there, you could be there in 10 years.
I think in less time. I mean, with what I've been watching with the 3D printing, and there's several different methods now for doing it, different types of machines that leave it solid walls versus open gap in the center to be able to run electrical and plumbing. The problem is change. And it's not just change on contractors, it's change in the codes that will allow you to do that.
Yep.
Because here's the other side, and we saw this with plumbing.
Yep.
I mean, it was literally where codes at the time wouldn't change codes to allow you to use different plastic piping systems. And it's this idea that change is bad somehow, and it's from the top down. So you have your codes don't allow it because it's new, it's not proven. Then you have contractors that aren't willing to try it, market it, and get behind it. And so you have these small groups and small pockets experimenting with it because most of the stuff
It falls on the manufacturer to
Yeah.
prove it
right.
to the code people. I mean, it's
so
a bizarre. Yeah.
It's just an interesting thing that here's a way that's more efficient, saves money, it's practical, repeatable, it solves some issues with termites and wind issues, but yet, oh no, we'd rather have you build it this way.
Yeah, tilt wall went through an issue where, there was some collapses, and it turns out it wasn't. Immediately people jumped on and said, well, it's because of the method. That's just a flawed method. You shouldn't be doing that. And they're like, no. And they looked into it and they found it wasn't the method. It was just different things that had happened and an awful set of things that lined up in order to allow that to fall. But that's what you're up against. You're up against anything that involves different types of construction methods or change. There's a lot of people who really like the way things are done because they're going to have to change and learn new things in order to adapt. And that dude installing sweat and copper his whole life for 30 years may not be very excited about switching over to PEX.
I remember this was 15 years ago, I worked with an engineer that was trying to come up with residential steel trusses. So instead of wood trusses, light frame steel. And he had a whole concept and everything like that. He could not get a single builder. It was approved in the code, you could do it. He couldn't get anyone to do it. And he was able to prove that it was actually cost savings over time doing it with a metal truss than it was, because you get more strength, you get bigger spans, you could do a lot more with it. And he couldn't get it to move forward where it would be, builders would use it. And it's just those types of things that's like so resistant to change. It's like, oh, we've always used wood, so we will use wood. And it's like,
well, they don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it.
But what does metal
I'm
bring
so
to the
behind.
table?
I can't stop and think about that.
Yeah. So, but what does metal bring? Well, it's fire resistant. It doesn't rot. There's other factors in here. Wind prone area, so it's strong. And it's that type of stuff that kind of frustrates me. But that's people in general.
50 years?
It's coming.
Amazon Homes.
Amazon Homes. Invest now. You heard it here. We are not investment professionals. Do not take our advice seriously. We are not Series 7 licensed, nor any other kind of licenses aside from the occasional contractor's license. Anyway, what do you think about all this? Where's construction going to be in 10 years, 50 years? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. Help us out by subscribing to our channel below. If you enjoyed what you saw, hit that like button and turn on notifications to stay up to date on our latest videos.